in third person, and it also discussed all hazards and threats, because the purpose of an EOP is for a locality or a state to prepare for all hazards. So that was essentially the grading scale. And again, if you didn't touch on tone in third person or all hazards, some points were deducted. Finally, the uh, the test, the exam had a scenario memo in which you had to provide some advice and insight to the city manager related to a mass shooting, active shooter situation. So the key points I wanted to look at was format and tone. Again, third person. And then if you outline the steps to take to enhance emergency planning for active shooter. Again, that was the question that was presented by the city manager. And then, it also mentioned any other agencies that need to participate. That was a question. Some of you all did not touch on that. Again, emergency management cannot do it all on their own. It has to pull in other partners in the local level, law enforcement, fire, EMS, etc. And then finally, spelling and grammar. The most points were given if you did not have any spelling or grammar issues. So again, you will have two more memos at least coming up. There's the second memo for the second half of the semester, and then there will be a memo component in the final exam, and the final exam will be comprehensive over the entire course. So that was the different grading criterias for the midterm exam. Again, I'm late in terms of responding to any of y'all questions. So if anyone wants to speak to me, feel free to shoot me an email, and we can set up a call and discuss it. But overall, I was pretty pleased with the scores on the exam. But there's a couple of areas and individuals that can improve, and just taking the time and trying to grasp the material. Looking ahead to the second half of the semester, we are now going to talk about response for 2 weeks. Response gets a lot of attention because that's what will be on the news on CNN. It's a very important part of the emergency management cycle. Again, it's most directly related to saving lives and preventing fatalities. And so we really talk about partnering with EMS, law enforcement, and fire, first responders, as it relates to those tasks. And so we'll talk about that. I'll provide more perspective. I know your discussion question this week looks at Hurricane Katrina and looking at the relationship between state, federal, and local as it relates to response for Hurricane Katrina, which is considered the most deadly and costly natural disaster in the U.S. in recent time. After response, we talk about recovery. Recovery is a really important part of the emergency management process. Many times after these devastating disasters, it takes well over, in some cases, a decade to rebuild a city or an area that's been impacted by a tornado or earthquake or hurricane. So we talk about the core components of recovery and who's involved in recovery. Again, recovery planning is another component of planning, and you pull in all the partners, because usually, millions and billions of dollars possibly are flooded in to a locality to help them to recover from a disaster. And how does that process work? So we'll discuss that. And then, from a professional development standpoint, the last 2 weeks of the semester is focused on coordination challenges related to emergency management, budgetary issues as well. How do we fund emergency management? How do we keep it going in the face of maybe other priorities? How do we coordinate with our various partners on the state, federal, local level, but also across disciplines, whether it's law enforcement, fire, EMS, health, etc. And then finally, we close out with future risks and threats You know, a lot of focus on extreme weather. It's getting the Earth is getting hotter. Electromagnetic pulse rays coming from the sun that can impact our networks. Sea level rise is impacting a lot of our coastal communities. Sea level rise plus subsidence, where the Earth is going is sinking, but the water is rising. So we'll talk about those future threats and how emergency management is dealing with that before we close out with a semester review. In a couple of weeks, you'll have an executive memo due. So I hope to have that posted here within the next week, so you can start on that and understand that. Again, looking for tone, answering the question, third person, and so we'll discuss that in more detail. And of course, don't forget the FEMA independent study certificates will be due around April 15th, a month from this week. And so please continue to make sure you do those at the end. By April 15th, I'll ask you all to send me the certificates that prove that you completed those courses. So those courses should be done on your own, and it's recommended when you do it in the syllabus, of course, but you should definitely do those, and you'll be required to submit those. And so I did mention I'm still grading the executive memos. I'll follow up when those are ready, and I'll post those in Blackboard, and I'll also show you the grading criteria. A lot of the same themes in terms of grading executive memos, third person, answering a question, tone, no spelling or grammatical errors. The discussion board questions, again, discussion board participation is similar to coming to class, and so it is a big component of the grade, about 25%. And so I sent out the grading matrix for the discussion board question. It's pretty simple. Your original post is worth 10 points, and then your first response and second response are worth 5 points each, for a total of 20 points. So please make sure you continue to participate in discussion board questions and respond and engage one another as it relates to some professional critique or feedback. And many of you all have been doing that, but for the ones who have not, please try to make sure you keep up for the second half of the semester, because it is an important part of the course and also the grade. So with that, I'll close out. Again, I knew this would be a little longer than the normal 10 minutes, but I appreciate y'all's patience related to me following up. And I'll look forward to responding to your emails, any phone calls, and I will also send out a video related to this week's discussion board question in about 2 to 3 days. Okay? Hope all's well, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.